There's a lie we all know, a lie so common, so automatic, that most people don't even realize they're telling it. It's two words, two simple words that can end a conversation before it even begins. I'm fine. You've said it, I've said it, we've all said it. But for some people, it's not just a polite deflection, it's a fortress. A wall built so high that no one gets to see what's really happening inside. You know someone like this. The person who smiles through everything, who never complains, never asks for help, never admits when they're struggling. The one you check on after something difficult happens and they wave you off with, I'm fine. Really? Don't worry about me. Maybe you are that person, and here's the question no one asks. Why? Why would someone choose to carry their pain alone when the world is full of people who would listen? Why would anyone build a life where suffering in silence feels safer than speaking the truth? It's easy to assume that people who never share their problems are just private, independent, strong, self-sufficient. But that's not the full picture, because beneath that calm exterior, beneath the I'm fine, and the quick subject changes, there's often a story, a history, a wound that taught them that sharing is dangerous. See, people who always say I'm fine aren't emotionally unavailable, they're emotionally careful. And there's a difference, because at some point, somewhere along the way, they learned that opening up comes with a cost, that vulnerability isn't met with support, it's met with dismissal, judgment, or worse, being used against them later. So they stopped sharing, not because they don't feel deeply, but because they feel too deeply, and the world has shown them over and over that their feelings are either too much, not enough, or simply inconvenient. Psychologists have studied this pattern extensively. They found that people who struggle to share their problems often score high on self-reliance, but low on perceived social support. It's not that they don't have people in their lives, it's that they don't trust those people to hold their truth without breaking it, or breaking them. But here's what's misunderstood. Saying I'm fine isn't one thing. It's not a single defense mechanism with a single origin. Some people say it because they were taught to. Others say it because they tried honesty once and regretted it. And some say it because they genuinely believe that their pain doesn't matter enough to burden anyone else with. Let me break it down. The parentified child. Some people learn to say I'm fine before they even understood what it meant. These are the children who grew up being the emotional support for their parents instead of the other way around. The ones who learned early that their job was to hold it together, to be strong, to not add to the already overwhelming chaos of the household. Maybe their parent was dealing with addiction, mental illness, or just life circumstances that left them emotionally unavailable. So the child adapted. They became the one who didn't need anything. The easy one, the strong one, the one who never complained. And when someone asked, "How are you?" they learned to say, "I'm fine," because anything else felt like a betrayal, like they were being selfish, like their needs were an inconvenience in a world that was already struggling to stay upright. That child is now an adult. And they still carry that programming. They still believe that their role is to be okay so others can lean on them, that their pain is less important than everyone else's, that asking for support is somehow taking something they don't deserve. For them, I'm fine isn't a lie. It's a duty. It's what they were trained to say to survive. And even now, in a life where survival isn't the issue anymore, they can't seem to unlearn it. The betrayed truth teller. Then there's another group, the people who used to share, who used to be open, vulnerable, honest about their struggles, until someone proved that honesty was a mistake. Maybe they shared something personal with a friend who later gossiped about it. Maybe they opened up to a partner who used their vulnerability as ammunition during a fight. Maybe they told a parent about their pain and were met with, "You think you have problems? Let me tell you about real problems." So they learned that the world doesn't reward vulnerability. It punishes it. It uses it. It diminishes it. And after enough of those experiences, something inside them shifted. They built walls, not out of coldness, but out of self-preservation. They decided that if sharing their truth led to pain, the safest option was to stop sharing altogether. Now, when someone asks how they're doing, they smile and say, "I'm fine." Not because they are, but because they'd rather carry the weight alone than risk being hurt again. Because loneliness, while painful, is at least predictable. But betrayal? Betrayal is unbearable. For them, I'm fine is armor. It's the shield they wear to protect the parts of themselves that have already been wounded too many times. The self-sufficient survivor. And then there's the person who learned that help isn't coming, that no matter how much they struggled, no matter how loudly they asked, no one showed up. So they stopped asking. These are the people who, at some point in their life, had to figure things out on their own. Maybe they were the eldest sibling in a chaotic family. Maybe they were left to navigate challenges without guidance. Maybe they asked for help once, twice, 3 times, and were met with silence or indifference. So they adapted. They became self-reliant, hyper-independent, the person who never needs anything from anyone because they learned that needing is a weakness the world exploits. And now, even when life is hard, even when they're drowning, they say, I'm fine. Not because they want to be alone, but because they've internalized the belief that they have to be. That asking for help is pointless because no one is coming anyway. For them, I'm fine is resignation. It's the acceptance that they're on their own, and they've made peace with that, even if that peace is lonely. The burden avoider. There's one more type. The person who genuinely believes that their problems aren't worth sharing, that their pain is too small, too insignificant, too inconvenient to take up anyone else's time or energy. These are the people who minimize their struggles, who compare their pain to others and decide theirs doesn't measure up, who think other people have it worse, so I have no right to complain. They say I'm fine because they've convinced themselves that their feelings are a burden, that sharing them would make them selfish, dramatic, or attention-seeking. So they keep everything inside, not because they don't trust others, but because they don't trust that their own pain is valid. For them, I'm fine is self-erasure. It's the quiet belief that they don't matter enough to take up space, even in their own life. All of these people, the parentified child, the betrayed truth-teller, the self-sufficient survivor, the burden avoider, they all share something in common. They've all learned, in different ways, that sharing their problems is risky, that the cost of vulnerability outweighs the potential benefit. And maybe at the time they learned that lesson, they were right. Maybe the people around them weren't safe. Maybe their environment didn't allow for honesty. Maybe survival meant staying quiet. But here's where it gets complicated, because what once protected them has now become a prison. The walls they built to keep pain out have also locked them in. And now, even when safe people show up, even when genuine support is offered, they can't accept it. Because the programming runs too deep. Deep down, people who always say, I'm fine, are often the ones suffering the most. Not because their problems are objectively worse than anyone else's, but because they carry them alone. And anything carried alone, no matter how small, eventually becomes too heavy. There's something quietly devastating about watching someone smile through pain, about knowing they're struggling and hearing them insist they're okay. Because you can see it, you can feel it, but they won't let you in. And the cruelest part? They're not doing it to push you away. They're doing it because they don't know how to let you stay. Because letting someone in requires trust, and trust for them is the hardest thing in the world, because trust has been broken before. Trust has led to disappointment. Trust has proven time and time again that people leave, people judge, people use what you tell them against you. So they stay safe, they stay behind the wall, they stay fine. But here's what happens when you spend years saying, I'm fine, when you're not. The isolation becomes normal, the loneliness becomes familiar, and the distance between who you are and who people think you are grows so wide that you start to forget yourself. You become so good at performing okayness that you lose touch with what you actually feel. You become so practiced at deflecting that you don't even know how to be honest anymore. You become so used to carrying everything alone that you wouldn't know what to do with support if it showed up. Psychologists call this emotional suppression, and research has shown that chronic emotional suppression is linked to anxiety, depression, and even physical health problems. Because the body keeps score, the mind keeps track, and no matter how good you are at pretending, the pain doesn't disappear. It just goes underground. It shows up in other ways. In the exhaustion you can't explain. In the irritability that seems to come from nowhere. In the moments when you break down over something small because you've been holding back something big for too long. There's also a subtle tragedy in this. Because people who always say, I'm fine, often end up surrounded by people who believe them, who take them at their word, who think, oh, they're strong. They don't need anything from me. And the person who's suffering starts to resent that. They resent being seen as unbreakable when they're barely holding it together. They resent that no one asks twice, that no one pushes past the I'm fine to see what's really there. But here's the paradox. They're the ones who trained people not to push. They're the ones who perfected the art of deflection. They're the ones who made it clear again and again that they don't need help. So people stopped offering. Not because they don't care, but because they were taught that caring is intrusive. And now, the person who says, I'm fine, is trapped in a cycle of their own making. They push people away while secretly wishing someone would stay. They insist they're okay while hoping someone will see through it. They build walls while resenting that no one climbs them. That's the loneliness of self-protection. You get what you asked for, to be left alone. But it's not what you wanted. What you wanted was to be safe enough to let someone in. But safety never came. So you stayed behind the wall. So what happens when someone who always says, I'm fine, finally reaches a breaking point? When the weight becomes too much to carry alone? Some collapse. They hit a wall, literal burnout, a breakdown, a crisis, and suddenly everyone around them is shocked. But they seemed fine. They never said anything. Others continue the performance. They double down on the I'm fine. They keep going, keep smiling, keep insisting everything is okay until one day they simply stop feeling anything at all. But a few, a rare few, do something different. They take the risk. They let one person in. They say, for the first time in years, actually, I'm not fine, and I haven't been for a while. And that moment is terrifying because it means dismantling the armor. It means trusting that this time will be different, that this person won't leave, won't judge, won't use their honesty against them. And sometimes they're right. Sometimes the person they choose is safe. Sometimes vulnerability is met with the compassion they've been craving all along. But sometimes it's not. Sometimes the risk doesn't pay off. And that's why so many people stay behind the wall, because the potential for disappointment feels too dangerous. But here's the truth that people who say, I'm fine, need to hear. You can't heal in the same environment that hurt you. And that includes the environment inside your own mind. Because the belief that you have to be okay all the time, that's not strength. That's survival. And survival is exhausting. It's not meant to be a permanent state. Strength isn't pretending you're fine. Strength is admitting when you're not. Strength is letting someone see you at your worst and trusting that they won't leave. Strength is believing that your pain is worth sharing, even if it feels small, even if others have it worse. Because pain isn't a competition. Struggle isn't something you have to earn the right to acknowledge. And needing support doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. Here's what letting go of I'm fine might look like. It starts with recognizing that vulnerability is not the same as weakness. That sharing your struggles doesn't make you a burden. It makes you real. It makes you honest. It makes you someone who trusts another person enough to let them in. It continues with testing the waters. You don't have to share everything with everyone. You don't have to tear down all the walls at once. But maybe you start small. Maybe you tell one safe person one true thing. I'm actually having a hard time. And you see what happens. Maybe they listen. Maybe they care. Maybe they don't fix it, but they sit with you in it. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough to remind you that you don't have to carry everything alone. And maybe most importantly, it means rewriting the story you've been telling yourself. The story that says your pain doesn't matter, that your needs are inconvenient, that asking for help is selfish. Because those stories aren't true. They never were. They were survival strategies born from environments that didn't know how to hold you. But you're not in that environment anymore. And the people around you now? They might be different. They might be safe. But you'll never know if you don't give them a chance. The world needs people who are honest about their struggles. It needs people who say, I'm not okay, so that others feel permission to do the same. Because when you pretend to be fine, everyone else feels like they have to pretend too. And that's how we end up with a world full of people who are silently suffering, all convinced they're the only one. But you're not the only one. You never were. There are so many people who would hold your pain if you let them. So many people who want to show up for you the way you've shown up for everyone else. But they can't if you won't let them in. So if you're someone who always says, I'm fine, know this. You're not protecting yourself by staying silent. You're isolating yourself, you're teaching the world that you don't need anyone, and then resenting the world for believing you. You deserve more than that. You deserve to be seen, to be heard, to be held even when you're falling apart. And maybe, just maybe, it's time to let yourself be held, not by everyone, not all at once, but by someone. One person who's safe, one person who won't leave, one person who can handle the truth of who you are, mess and all. Because you're more than I'm fine. You're more than the walls you've built. You're more than the armor you wear. You're a person who's been carrying too much for too long, and you don't have to anymore. So maybe, just for today, try something different. When someone asks how you are, pause, take a breath, and instead of saying, I'm fine, say something true. I'm struggling, I'm tired, I'm not okay, but I'm working on it. And see what happens. You might find that people don't run, that they don't judge, that they've been waiting for you to be honest because they could see through the I'm fine all along. And maybe, just maybe, you'll remember what it feels like to not be alone, to share the weight, to trust that someone else can hold what you've been carrying by yourself. That's not weakness, that's courage, that's healing, that's freedom. And you deserve that. You deserve to stop pretending, to stop performing, to stop saying I'm fine when you're not. Because the truth is, no one is fine all the time. And pretending you are doesn't make you strong. It just makes you exhausted. So let yourself be tired. Let yourself be honest. Let yourself be human. And when someone asks how you are, give them the truth. Not the version that keeps them comfortable. The version that's real. Because that's where connection lives. That's where healing begins. That's where you finally stop carrying everything alone. You've been fine for long enough. Maybe it's time to be honest instead.